All right, Peter, good news. I do believe that we are live here on YouTube talking DS9 Season 1 because it's time for the V'ger Please end of season rip. Welcome, if you've never joined us before for one of these, particularly if you've never joined us live. I'm Joseph.
I'm the co-host, Peter.
And every season that we complete reviewing Star Trek, we take a moment, reflect on the season that was, and hand out some awards. You know, some of them are they're standard awards, right? Like, what's the best episode? What's the best character? What's the worst? But we have some specific ones that you and I have enjoyed giving out over the years. One in particular that I think is a favorite invention of yours. And we'll hand all of those out. Hopefully, we'll have some people come into the chat, want to give us, some attention, and maybe even give us some ideas of things to talk about. I do see that we've at least a few people that have started to listen, so thank you. Seth, hello. It's good to see you. So before we get into it, though, there's one thing I want to make sure I share with everybody. And that is, if you could, to be generous. So the fundraiser for June, we're still doing for the fact that, unfortunately, her whole life got upended as a consequence of the hurricane that hit her part of North Carolina. And we've done a great job as a community fundraising for her. I mean, her house was just, partially destroyed. Her cars were destroyed. Her livelihood was essentially ruined. But this is an opportunity for us to help somebody who really needs it. And June let me know that she's gotten enough donations, basically from people in her own community, that if we can get this number that's on this GoFundMe from 800 to 1,000 by the end of our broadcast, I think we will have done a great job with fundraising on her behalf. So thank you very, very, very much to everybody who has donated so far. I am not somebody who typically likes to talk about charity. Charity, in my opinion, is something that is supposed to be private. But this is one of those rare opportunities where, we really do have somebody that's a fan of the show that got personally wounded as a consequence of a natural disaster, and I'd love to do something to help them out. So if you...
by the weather.
Yes. So if you have the capacity to do that, we would appreciate it. And on that note, Peter, it's time to talk DS9 Season 1, man. So, right off the rip, what did you think? As far as Season 1 fares, what'd you think? As far as all the hype, this is the treat. This is the cherry on top of the Star Trek Sundae that you've deprived yourself of for years so that we can enjoy it.
For everybody at home, I knew way back in, what year did this start?
We started podcasting in...
Deep Space Nine.
Oh, geez, 1993?
I think that was junior high, maybe even early. I don't know. I knew way back then as a wee lad, couldn't watch. I had to save it until the year 2024.
It's like, wait, no, 30 years from now, that'll be the time.
Yes. Had only I done something more with the knowledge that I knew that there would be podcasts and Googles and Apple, I could have been very rich, but instead I've passed that time traveling genius onto you, the customer, to give you a better Star Trek podcast show. It's what we've been saying this entire time, and it is that for all the goofy problems that Enterprise had and Voyager had in their season ones, DS9 just came out of the gate knowing more or less what it wanted to be about, and where some of these other shows had to use a good chunk of season one explaining who the characters. I guess that's really the distilled comment here, is that this is a show about characters.
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek always is, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, when it's at its best, certainly.
And Enterprise and Voyager took a very long time to explain who these characters were and to try to portray them in a light where you as the audience give a shit.
Especially Enterprise. Even though it was a shorter kind of show, it did feel like it took almost until the end before you really cared about anything that was going on.
And there were still characters by the end I didn't give a shit about. Fucking Reed specifically.
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
really tried hard to care about Mayweather, and they just didn't give us much opportunity to. Same with Hoshi.
Mayweather, they figured out he is a character best left out of focus in the background. So what little you do get of him, you can appreciate and feel good about. And also, he makes a better lover boy than he does a space trucker.
As we found out in the finale, obviously.
You get him around some ladies, and now you're cooking with butter. Deep Space Nine, all these characters came in firmly footed, and even Dax, who I think you'll agree is one of the low points of season 1, in the big picture is still a perfectly acceptable and fine character.
The lows were not low, I think, is the overall impression I have in rewatching season 1. And I appreciate the lack of low even more so after experiencing how bad it can be in Voyager, in Enterprise, and even reflecting on TNG. We may not have covered that. But, yeah, in DS9, not to say that there weren't bad episodes, but overall, I came away from season 1, which is absolutely considered the worst season of DS9 by a lot, saying that was fine. In fact, it was pretty good overall and had greatness within it, particularly towards the end. Did you think it had established its identity well, though? That is the one major criticism I have, is it took basically until the end of the season before it was like, okay, maybe we're not going to do the TNG plots here. Maybe we really do have... I can
say there was 2 TNG plots that really stood out as like awkward fits. Move Along Home and If Wishes Were Whores. Right?
Those were definitely examples. I think that there are others, though. I think that one of my personal disfavorites of the season, The Forsaken, is essentially a TNG episode that does not belong on DS9. Dramatis Personae, another one that doesn't belong there. That's another TNG episode. Even Q-less, which I did not dislike, which is something of a compliment that I did not hate the Q episode of the season, just didn't belong there. It was still awkward. So it figured it out towards the end, as we talked about endlessly as we reviewed Duet in the Hands of the Prophets.
I wouldn't even go that far. The show needs to be about a crew that is not prepared for what is going to be asked of it. This is a crew that was sent out to get Bajor into the Federation and to administrate a space station that is not Federation built, right?
Yeah.
And then this wormhole thing comes in, and now it's like, well, fuck, this is not what I signed up for necessarily, but it's cool Starfleet stuff, and I'm going to stick around for it. And I think that as a premise, they do very well in this first season.
Okay.
There's deeper nuances they want to go into in terms of being a gritty TV show where politics and religion and space threats all mix. And I'm sure they'll get real deep in the paint there, but the important backdrop to all of that is you've got a split loyalty crew. One is to Bajor and the other is to Federation ideals. You've got this big civilian element.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got a space butthole that's slowly dripping little shits from the Gamma Quadrant.
Never good. Not a single good thing comes through that space butthole all season.
The best thing that came through that space butthole was a murderous kill me boy. Tark, or what was his name? Tak,
yeah.
Bach?
Something like... No, it was the... what was it? He was a Transdoshan, or what would you say? Bosk.
Yeah,
he was Bosk.
Bosk, whatever.
Yeah.
The best thing, the nicest guy that came out of there was someone who's bred to die.
Chased by guys in burgundy hooker boots. Just the worst.
I think the hooker boots were black. It was I don't know. Those were terrible. Do we have the worst looking alien on here yet? Because that's my vote.
Well, I did put it on there because it was just such a consensus first round pick for both of us. Although that was honestly a problem that you and I had as we reviewed the material. We're like, how do we not talk about the same things when we talk about best episodes and worst episodes? How do we do this? And it turns out we did actually have some different picks, which I was happy for. But
it's intentional. As we go through these picks on things, I saw Joe's answers were my answers a lot of times, and I've intentionally picked many things different just so I'm not saying I agree.
Variety for you, the viewer. We're here for you. We want to entertain you. So,
but no, as a season 1 product, like this thing came out incredibly strong to a degree that Voyager and Enterprise certainly nowhere near. And I am forced to wonder now if Voyager and Enterprise season 1s were as bad as they were because they were intentionally trying to do different stuff than what was happening in Deep Space Nine. And that's something that we need to keep in mind, that while you and me and everybody else who is listening to a podcast about this shit, how many years later?
30 years later, yeah.
30 fucking years later, you know, we were not the majority, or I should say you were not the majority of the people watching this television show. And a lot of people didn't stick around, and they probably hemorrhaged a lot of people that were there for the traditional Enterprise style adventures.
Yeah, I mean, this is the other syndicated program, right? So TNG and DS9, neither of them aired in a network slot consistently in every market. A lot of times, depending on where you lived, is how you caught it, and you kind of had to keep your head on a swivel to make sure you're catching the new episodes. So it's hard to really do what we did before when looking at like Nielsen ratings and really being able to understand viewership. It is generally understood that DS9 did not perform as well as TNG, but it did perform well as a syndicated program. So
and again, I think if you're stepping back and saying, why is this not doing as well as Next Gen? Okay, they're not doing the flying around in space thing.
Yeah.
It's harder to follow. It's a lot darker.
Oh, yeah.
All right, the next thing we need to get back to basics, and we are going to bring out Voyager, which compared to Deep Space Nine is incredibly dumbed down. Like, and if you didn't like what happened to Special and the character builder system in Fallout after Fallout 3, effectively that's what I feel that happens from Deep Space Nine into Voyager. So I think maybe a lot of the bad footing that Voyager starts off with and just persistent problems they have through is because they're intentionally staying away from what has made Deep Space Nine great in our book.
And we said it at the time that we reviewed Voyager, although you didn't have the context for it. Now you are, which is somewhat interesting for folks that end up going back and listening to our old episodes, which I know because we've had a significant pickup in folks following along the show because we're covering DS9. I encourage you to do that. But I said at the time, in fact, that I suspected the intentionality behind Voyager not having an expansive recurring cast is because that's what DS9 was doing. And it made it a denser and more difficult show to follow, and they had this as a network anchor on the UPN, speaking in this case of Voyager. So they wanted to keep it stripped down to the original cast and build the show around those people, and to build plots that people can kind of dip in and out on so that you didn't have to feel like you watched every single episode of the season to follow what's going on. Because, spoiler alert, that's precisely what happens with DS9 as time goes on, which probably doesn't already surprise you. And we've only done one episode of season 2 so far, and it's already leaning in hard to concepts of continuity that we wouldn't have dared consider when we were watching Voyager. So interesting.
Oops. Big mistake.
Yeah, turns out that was not the right call. But what is the right call is some of the best episodes of season 1 of DS9. So I will go ahead and give mine first, if that's all right with you, Peter, since as you noted,
by all means, please.
Your answers were
just going to have the same thing. You go first because it's what my answer should have been.
Yes, and well, they're the answers anyone would have given. And probably in this order. Number 1 is Duet. Duet is transcendent in terms of Trek being able to be something more than its material. Easy number 1 of the season. And when we wrap DS9 entirely, I wouldn't be shocked if this ends up being my number one for the whole show. Number two is in the hands of the prophets, which is really kind of the thesis statement of DS9. When you really think about, like, this is, we're going to start doing meta plot, we're going to start establishing characters that are very specific to that, we're going to start establishing antagonists, we're going to create stakes, we're going to create a real texture around the Bajoran identity, and we're going to deliver on a dense political thriller within the DS9 universe. And it's all extraordinarily well executed. And then the third, I have Emissary, the pilot, which I think is also just it is the best opener of any of the Bourbon Era Trek series.
Incredibly low bar.
A very low bar, but it clears it, and it clears it pretty easily from the intro segment that's in Wolf 359 to, the first trip to Azeroth.
What a fun place to start too, right?
Yeah. Getting your ass kicked by Locutus, and then you're collecting orbs down on Azeroth from a quest giver. You're meeting trans-dimensional aliens before you know it. And you've moved the space buckies into position around the butthole, so now your life is much more complicated. It does it all very effectively. It establishes the characters. 10 out of 10, especially for an opener. Special honorable mention, though, to the Nagus, the Ferengi episode of the season, I would say, which Ferengi episodes, they're derided as comedic sideshows at best and awful at the worst, and certainly there are some awful ones, but the Nagus in particular, because it's the first time we've really gotten a lot of Ferengi backstory, and you bring in Wallace Shawn, who does a great job with playing Grad Nagus Zek and becomes a recurring character. I think that one very nearly knocks Emissary off, but in my opinion doesn't quite get there. So, still honorable mention to that one. Peter, what are yours?
I'm going to go with Duet. The one thing I'll say about Duet that you didn't really touch on is this well that Deep Space Nine likes going to, that I've dubbed the Outer Limits, right, where we have, before we were calling them Shakespearean, conceptual episodes where we want to really highlight some sort of moral of the story by the end, and that is going to be focused on after this big morality twist or plot twist takes place that just kind of turns everything upside down on its head. Forsaken was one of those. And then what did we say the other one was that really touched on it? I think it was the Kira goes to the planet and
Progress. Yeah. The one with the farmer.
Yeah. Yeah. Duet pulls it off perfectly, and I think the key to the story is to chill out on the sci-fi technobabble and focus more on concepts that are easily accessible to different times, and if you were to cut all the alien stuff out. So as the best in class of that Outer Limits style episode, I liked it. And everything else you said was great. And in the end, it comes down to these... Kira Reese needs a soapbox to really talk about her conflict. I think you correctly said that season 1 is a show where Kira Reese is kind of the main character, and using her as the lens to view what Bajor and Tarek Nor and the Bajoran Cardassian conflict and the Bajoran Federation uneasiness. Like, she is just this poster child of all of that angst. And luckily Nana Vister's a fucking badass who can just tear these scenes up and make them excellent to watch. So,
oh yeah,
that's just a great focal point, and perfect example of everything that she's capable of and what season 1 is trying to be about. I put the Nagus in as a best episode for me because
defensible. I agree.
It's a great view of what this part of space and what the Gamma Quadrant represents from a civilian aspect, even though the Nagus is this government apparatus, basically, along with his cronies. But like, bigger than the Federation, what does all this stuff represent? Why is it important? What do these other outsiders think about what the Federation or Starfleet's doing here?
And as you mentioned already, the civilian plot lines that we see get developed over season 1, they matter a lot. I mean, this is the first Star Trek series, maybe really the only Star Trek series, where civilian characters matter significantly. I don't really, by the way, don't consider Neelix and Kes civilian characters. They had jobs on the ship. They were on the ship. They just didn't wear uniforms.
They should have been wearing uniforms.
They should have, frankly. Particularly Neelix. And then sometimes he did. But
one time, yeah.
In the case of DS9, no, we have some real, actual civilian characters that interact with the world in a way that is completely different than the way that we're used to through Starfleet characters. And yeah, the Negus is definitely an episode where that is a huge part of what's going on. And not just because it provides all of that Ferengi backstory that we've been looking for.
Number 3 slot, I'm actually going to give to Culus.
Oh my. Not in the hands of the prophets. To the Q episode.
Culus, I only rated as a meh. But Culus has been the one episode of the season that I've been able to go back to many, many times as we have reviewed things. And Culus was episode 7. And I want to say that you and I have talked about Culus in passing at least every other episode, if not every episode since, because there was so much fun stuff in there, specifically in terms of Vosh, in terms of Quark's Ferengi capitalism, sketchy-ass concepts that can only happen at Deep Space Nine, specifically trafficking stolen artifacts and whatnot out of the Gamma Quadrant through the wormhole.
Q as more a trickster and less a weird cucked simp. You know, like someone with a hard edge to him, someone who's dangerous. Somebody
cool
who's
special effects when he ages her and like gives her the spider bite back or whatever, and like reminds you like this dude's dangerous, and Vosh gets to be a bad bitch and, you know, shrug all that off and be like, you know, if you want
Quark making fun of the Federation C team that's on DS9 to begin with, and making fun of the fact that they don't figure out the space problem as fast as the Enterprise people do. Like,
it is
calling it out.
It's a real scrapbook of concepts that I think have longevity through the rest of the season. Earlobe hand jobs.
Oh yeah.
Great stuff.
There was a lot more to that episode that you and I liked than I thought we were going to like. I dreaded actually watching, like, oh god, the one random Q episode they did in season 1. This is going to be so bad. I'm like, actually that worked better than I thought. Really only the interaction between Sisko and Q was where it was like a little ham-handed, a little forced, you know, basically putting
and that's
Sisko
drop in the bucket stuff compared to what we had to deal with in Voyager.
Right. And it was more Q, you know, just kind of fucking with him than anything else, so you can kind of just give it a pass. So in the end, I think the part of that episode that I liked the most was that Q kept waiting for these people to figure out the answer to the space problem, because he's expecting them to find the answer, because he doesn't actually want Vosh to get hurt, and he's just making fun of them. He's just mocking them, and like just teleporting around the ops, like, hey, have you figured it out yet? You guys got this yet? Huh? No? Okay. All right.
I'm gonna start giving you answers, and you're just gonna ignore them because you're stupid and bad compared to the flagship. And through all of it again, Sisko refusing to call Picard to get any assistance from the subject material expert
after being told by O'Brien precisely what's going on. So you had no excuse except, fuck that guy, he killed my wife. Which is a good excuse. Let's be honest. All right. Well, good episodes are fun to talk about. Bad episodes might sometimes be more fun to talk about.
Well, before we jump up through, we got guys over in the live chat. Do any of you think that we had a wildly wrong take on our best episode?
Yes. No, please let us know in the chat. Participate in the chat. speak in the chat, interact with what we're doing in the chat. That's the whole reason we decided to do a live one for a change.
Immortalize your comments forever in the halls of podcast by
Yes.
submitting. So we'll keep an eye on that. Where'd you want to go from here, Joe?
Oh, worst episodes. We got to talk about the bad. And the bad, once again, I think we're quite similar here. But Peter, you'd start us off this time.
The concern is, what are we going to do when we watch good Star Trek that low-hanging fruit isn't there for us to ruthlessly exploit?
Well, don't worry. Season 1 had enough low-hanging fruit for us to exploit.
Yeah, but still, man, I would still say, looking at what we have down as our worst.
I mean, it's no season sucks. It's like no season poo. It's definitely like not as, with one exception, in my opinion. But
we'll start us off there. What do you think there's anything in there that is going to compare with ex post facto or Elogium or
everything in season 2 of Enterprise? I can't even actually, how bad
the Q and the gray barf.
It's interesting how we can recall the titles of the
I have it hanging up on my wall.
Terrible episodes of Voyager, but I cannot actually remember most of the episodes from season 2 of Enterprise at this point. They have fled my memory utterly. I'd have to rewatch it to know. It's like the only things that stayed in my memory from season 2 were the random episode that was the Shran episode where Soval was with him and does the negotiation, and I'm pretty sure there might be a Trucker Justice episode in that season at some point. No, it was when Mayweather met his family. That's also a Trucker Justice episode, and then the one where the Xindi show up at the end. I actually cannot remember. We watched it. We recorded hours of podcasts about it. Hundreds of people have listened to them. I literally cannot remember them. But I will remember my worst episodes. What are yours, Peter?
I will go with Dramatis Personae.
It's a good number 1.
I would say it's the worst.
It's the only actually rancid bad episode of the season, in my opinion.
To that end, my scale, which I continue, is trash, bad, meh, good, and great. And out of season 1 of Deep Space Nine, I have 1 trash. I got 4 bads, 6 meh, 6 goods, and 2 greats. And Dramatis Personae is the trash. It is the best thing. The only good thing I can say about that is evil bitch Kira is attractive to watch on screen, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
And I know there's going to be better episodes that do it more.
Yeah. As the No Peter's Allowed section of Discord has spoken about in length.
And Cisco builds a cool clock.
It's true. And a cool clock that will be on his desk for the next 7 goddamn seasons.
And if I was to have to find a third thing in there, it is that Odo is the antithesis of Detective Tuvok and immediately picks up that shit's wrong and starts kind of trying to move to fix it. But the main thrust of that episode, again, is, I don't know if I would consider this one I guess this would be no, because there's not a big moral lesson to be learned at the end, so it's not really an Outer Limits episode. It's just a dumb what if.
Yeah, it's episode. It's a dumb space hazard episode. Some random brain aids shows up from the fucking Gamma Quadrant, as it does, causes mayhem.
Defies all physics.
Yeah, the doom level becomes very doomy for a little while, and then it ends. That's it. There's no lessons to be learned. There's nothing to generate from it. It just sucks. It sucks.
It's ineffective in communicating what the scope of the threat was, because is it just the bridge crew or the command crew that's effectively under the the influence of this thing? Is it in the entire station? It's just trash and a crap. It's a waste of time. Because people are not in their right minds, there's not really good continuity to move forward because everybody basically just agrees to pretend that it didn't happen, right?
Yeah, it's the end of the episode. Like, I don't know. We'll just well, bygones are bygones.
Number 2 for me is Move Along Home, which certainly was set up to be a terrible episode in terms of what everybody said about it. But as you pointed out, at least it kept us engaged. And as I'm watching that through a podcaster lens, it's like, wow, this thing's got a lot of fun stuff to talk about.
Deeply enjoyable from the perspective of a podcaster to be able to talk about garbage. Because it's so striking and so ridiculous that it begs commentary. And so episodes like that are bad but fun will always get a huge pass from me in terms of really being considered terrible. Because the reason why Dramatis Personae is also my number 1 worst episode of the season is because it offends you in the worst way, which is it bores you. It's a slog to get through. You don't want to watch it. And when you start talking about it, you can't get it over fast enough, right? Like, those are the worst actual episodes of Star Trek. And we found this out actually early when we were doing Voyager, because we did Threshold. And what happened? Actually, watching Threshold's a lot of fun. Talking about Threshold's a lot of fun.
I love Threshold.
Yeah. Or Tuvix, right? Like, that was so much fun to talk about because it's wild. It's batshit. It's insane. What are the worst ones? Elogium. You know, like, the ones that are boring and awful and it can't get over with fast enough because it's not doing anything to engage you. So, is Move Along Home bad? Yes, of course it's bad. It's about how this crew of DS9 gets captured in a board game run by the Joe Dirt people of the Gamma Quadrant. Quark gambles with everyone's lives. But you know what? Quark's in it. Odo's in it. There's ridiculous shit happening. The Joe Dirt people leave with 0 consequences. The episode just kind of ends randomly for no particular reason. So much content.
My 3rd place, which realistically is probably my 2nd place, is Dax.
Yeah.
It's a awful concept. What was her name? CJ. She just passed.
Oh, the lady who, Miss Landingham, the judge lady?
No, the writer.
Oh, okay. Jerry Taylor?
DC Fontana.
Oh, DC Fontana. Yeah, no, you're right. That was her only episode that she wrote of DS9.
There was a good episode in there, and for some reason, she did not make the episode go that way, where the wife was the fucking killer, and instead we find out that the guy who died, that this entire thing is basically based on, and where all of the overwhelming guilt that Dax feels to the point where she is going to keep her mouth shut and get Jadzia executed unjustly for the previous iterations adultery, right? That guy, turns out he is this huge traitor to his people that was for some reason giving away state secrets to the rebellion group who rewarded him by killing him. It was the dumbest fucking ending possible that made the entire episode infuriating to watch. In retrospect, I think Dax's actions through that entire thing are not at all justifiable.
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, that's the reason why that episode deserves to wear a crown of shame. Is your major introduction to the character of Dax is that her prior incarnation, which Cisco talks about all the time about what a great guy he is, was apparently a serial philanderer who, despite being a diplomat, was fucking a major foreign dignitary's wife behind his back. Like, this is how we're getting introduced to a main character, basically. Like, none of this is covering anybody in glory. It's weird. It's not really telling us anything about Jadzia. It's telling us about Curzon, which is supposed to be separate. And I get the need to talk about Dax and the symbiote and all of that, but as you and I have already discovered, they just didn't know how to fucking write any of this in season 1. They got it way better, way quicker in season 2. But this is just them trying to figure out what the rules of the road are going to be with this character and going down a path that just doesn't really serve the plot, doesn't serve Jadzia as a character particularly well, and doesn't do anything.
It's ridiculous that this is a character to really supposed to be the first Jadzia focused episode, and she doesn't even talk for at least 50%.
Well, Jadzia is not the focus. It's Curzon, right? Like that's the trick. And Curzon's not a character on the show. He's not. It's
Throw
Jadzia.
That fucking episode in the trash. I hated it. What did I called it a bad. The more I think about it, it should probably be a trash. It's just everything about it was wrong. Detective Odo was great.
Yes.
And that's not enough of that episode to really justify deeper in.
To me,
fun guest actors though.
Oh, and maybe that's why I ultimately decided to pick that. My spot, my number 2 out of the 3 worst, because Dramatis Persona is my number 1 and Move Along Home is my number 3, and for the exact same reasons. My number 2 is The Forsaken, just because so much more of it was boring, and I didn't want to talk about than Dax. Dax was one of those episodes that had a lot to comment on because how bad it was. Like you said, the ending, like there was content there for us as armchair producers to discuss, but Dramatis. Or rather, The Forsaken, the only thing that makes that episode worth watching is...
Which one's Forsaken?
That's Lixana.
So I'm thinking...
That's Lixana and Odo.
Passenger.
Is, like...
Elevator scene.
The elevator scene, that's the only thing to watch out of the whole thing, and it's like 15 minutes. And the rest of it you can throw in the trash.
I did like the other diplomats interacting with Bashir.
I didn't. I found that just annoying.
I liked it because it was a good view of the Federation separate from Starfleet, and I think it really reinforced how dumb it is that, especially with this big ensemble cast, that Deep Space Nine did not have a dedicated diplomatic corps on board, and that, you know, this was all stuff that's being heaped on a shipbuilder's plate that should have never been anywhere near there. But, yeah, Forsaken was crappy.
Shout out to Seth. He's got some comments here that I like. First, it might actually be more interesting to identify the meh episodes of season 1 than the worst and the best, because what is meh might actually be more subjective, which I agree. So I would like to go through what your meh episodes were here in a second. He also said he actually liked Dramatis Persona because the crazy Bajoran who was willing to drug Cisco, like there was all kinds of like weird stuff happening there that was kind of interesting. What happens to this guy? Yeah, like random thug life Bajoran and everything else. And okay, there were moments of life in it. I'm not saying there weren't, but it was still bad overall. Seth, you're wrong on that.
To pull it out of the dumpster. Sorry, bro.
But what were your meh episodes?
A Man Alone, and that was Oops, I Cloned Somebody.
Yes.
Which shout out to the first appearance of the Odo lynch mob. Captive Pursuit, which I think that was the Most Dangerous Game, right?
Yes.
Q-less, which ends up being one of my top picks. Vortex. What was Vortex?
Vortex is that the one where the twins that are played by Degra and the rando from the Gamma Quadrant who's actually already a murderer, and Odo gets hit by a rock and gets knocked out. That's Vortex.
Vortex could have very easily been a good episode if they could have made the parts that were not Quark's bar or the last 4 minutes where Odo has like morality problems. Like it was murder hobo in the brig. Like that was the boring drag of all that. The storyteller, which just an absurd cockamamie episode on many different levels.
Yeah, adventuring in Azeroth. There was a lot of fun to be had in Bashir and O'Brien having their first adventure together.
Being attempted murdered and then leaving the attempted murderer as the caregiver of a fucking village. Like red flag. Both those guys, I'm assuming they just never filed reports on them, because I think those officers would have to be cycled out for people that were not psychotic. And then If Wishes Were Horses.
Interesting. I think all of your mehs make sense to me. Those are all kind of meh episodes, I think, aside from the storyteller, which I That's one of my personal favorites of the season, just because the plot is so fucking wild, and
But the Matt episodes are like absurd shit in them that is fun to like think back on, right? Like they had problems, but there's still like I would go back and watch any of those again.
I think the storyteller to me rises above the rest of your Matt bunch, because that's the one where you just have Bashir and O'Brien, where Bashir is like, I think this shit's fucking great. This is fun adventure Starfleet time. I live for fun adventure Starfleet time. And O'Brien's too busy getting into fucking fights with people trying to kill him. You know, like taking their knives and shit to care about this fun adventure that Bashir wants to be on right now. And that's how their friendship starts, right? Like, and they have the interplay between the two of them of like O'Brien doesn't like him and all of that other shit. So that undercurrent rises it into sort of the good category for me overall. But Seth was right. That discussion we just had probably more entertaining than talking about the worst episodes, since we kind of already know what those are.
The season 1 doesn't give you any option but to know what they are.
Yeah,
it's they just stick out like sore thumbs.
It's true. Now, another thing we like to talk about are best characters and worst characters. But before we get into that, we have to expand the category, because we typically just talk about this in terms of like main characters, but it's going to be best main character, worst main character, best recurring character, best one-shot character, because that's different. What do you think of this ensemble cast approach? I mean, you wanted this. Do you like it?
I love it.
Okay.
Especially when you've got rock solid characters all over the fucking place. Quark, Odo, Kira. Like, this Star Trek show doesn't deserve all three. Like, pull 2 of these characters out, throw one in Enterprise, and give the other one to Voyager. Please. You know, how selfish of DS9 to hog so many goats.
This is interesting, like how like episodes like the Nagus of your 4 main characters, 2 were recurring characters. 2 aren't even on your main cast. Or like the B plot of Progress is Jake and Nog hustling for self-stealing stem bolts and random property acquisitions on Azeroth. Like, they just like show up in episodes and just are there and take up a lot of space, and your main cast maybe gets 1 line. It's a bold choice, but they make it.
They do. So, Joe, who is your favorite main cast character?
So, I'm going to be curious, like, about the discussion we have about people who aren't first, because I think we're going to end up with the same person. The main best main character by leaps and bounds is Kira. Kira is not only played by an actor who seems to be 150% dialed in from the jump in a way that is extremely commendable and lends to an amazing performance, but the character itself is interesting. Like, we've never had someone like this before. Kira is not a member of Starfleet. She's military, but she is not in Starfleet. She's part of this local militia. She's part of that local militia because 20 seconds ago she was a fucking terrorist murdering as many Cardassians as she gets her hands on. She has angst.
Civilians, too.
Yeah, she has angst. She has damage because of those civilian deaths. She's religious and intensely so. She's antagonistic to our purported main character. We'll get to that. And the commander of the space station in a way that's not just for show, but genuine and real. And the show goes out of its way to justify that antagonism, that the Bajorans have a point about wanting to be free of interference from other major galactic powers, because that's been their whole life. She's amazing. Mana Vister's amazing. Kira Nerys is amazing. She's the best character on the show in season 1, and it's not close. Quark and Odo are great. Under almost any other circumstance of any other season of Star Trek, they would be by far the best characters. Kira's that much better.
Quark's my favorite, season 1.
What?
Kira's great, but her subject material is so heavy and depressing to think about, whereas Quark is just fun and nefarious, and again, you've got the civilian insight into stuff.
If you don't want depressing, you're watching the wrong show. Like,
I mean, I do.
Strap
but
yourself
again,
in.
can watch Quark guilt free, and it's wonderful the entire way through. His body language and his physical acting, Armin Shimmerman's physical acting, is so noticeable and so enjoyable that like I just found myself rewatching Quark scenes repeatedly, and these Kira scenes would come in and make an impact, but I wasn't like, oh man, let me watch that again. Let me let that wash over me.
I watched. I
So
mean, Quark is amazing. Armin Shimmerman is on another level with that character. We praised how well he acts through a tremendous amount of makeup, as a kind of added difficulty modifier for him. He's playing on, hell modifier, and Kira's playing on normal with her little nose ridges. But I watched the Kira episodes and Kira scenes over and again, and really picking up on the nuances of how she portrayed the character and how just vivid her character's emotions are on her face and how she acts with her whole body.
who's the humor character? Yeah, who's the humor character in Next Gen? Data?
I would say primarily him, yeah.
Then Voyager would be Neelix. Maybe the EMH.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Kim for all the wrong reasons.
Enterprise would be Trip, probably.
Phlox.
And Phlox, yeah.
Maybe T'Pol. I mean, T'Pol's sassiness.
Nah, it's definitely Trip. Trip and Phlox are the comedy characters in Enterprise because they're the ones that are most, Trip because he's too down to earth and Phlox because he's too alien. Like, T'Pol, her shit's played straight for the most part. Shadow nips aside.
Yeah, but I mean, she still had a fair amount of humor under her belt as a straight man, I guess, in Trip scenes. So it's still Trip. This one, it's, I would say, primarily the Ferengi as exemplified through Quark. And I think the way he's moving the humor in this, it's not cheap. It's not like silly music in the background. And I think that's part of what endears me to him is like, there's this humor element to what he's doing, and it's not overt. Like, just again, great scripting and great acting. I feel good about Quark as my pick for best main character season 1.
Who is
Flip side?
Who is the main character of DS9? That's my running question.
Kira for season 1.
Yeah, and I think that'll be interesting to revisit, though. I agree. I think Kira is the main character of DS9 for season 1. I don't think that's always the case, though. And I think this question will be interesting to revisit as we go through each individual season. Like, who was the main character? And I think it's interesting that it is going to change because I think that the intention of the showrunners for Voyager and Enterprise were that Janeway and Archer were the main characters. I think the intention is that Sisko's the main character. He's just not actually the main character. It's framed in a way to suggest that he is, but Kira's story dominates probably half the fucking episodes of the season.
They don't really touch a lot of Sisko's shit, though. Like, his involvement as the with the chosen one. What is
the emissary? Yeah,
the emissary is touched on 3 times, I think. So he's not really playing with all the toys in the toy box there. Or main character Joe is.
I think we
can only be one person.
Yeah, we have the same answer, and I think we're both going to stick to our same answer for the sake of accuracy. It's Dax. I say that with no pleasure in my heart. I love Jadzia Dax. Jadzia Dax turns into a great character as time goes on. In fact, Jadzia Dax
season 2 rolls around.
Yeah, season 2, she's already vastly improved. In season 1, they barely use her. They don't really know what her character's about. And
she doesn't know what her character's about.
Terry Farrell isn't doing anything on screen to make you care because she's just not there yet. And the one episode where she's the focus, she literally doesn't talk.
She has no agency in her own episode, and that's all you need to know about season 1.
You have a note here that is completely accurate. Sad Jake beat her out. Also, very clear. Jake was absolutely a more interesting character, and it's not close.
His episodes with his dad being able to let Cisco speak as a father instead of a Starfleet commander are gold. Jake as a character overall just beats the shit out of Dax. The adventures with Nog,
teaching Nog to read in the cargo bay, like the true Federation optimist that he is.
Dax, I can't give you a single memorable scene at all of season 1. So,
I think trying to make out with Julian in If Wishes Were Whores is the only thing that can come to mind. Like, horny posting is the only way I think you can actually like come up with something that is memorable, and it isn't for the right reasons.
Who's your favorite reoccurring character?
Yes, so we're gonna do reoccurring character and one-shot character. So reoccurring character are options for this season. The way my determination is, a reoccurring character is someone that appears in multiple episodes of Deep Space Nine across multiple seasons and had an appearance within the season in question. In this case, we have Nog, Rom, Garrick, Vedic Wynn, Vedic Barile, Negus Zek, Dukat. Answer for me, it's Dukat. I don't think it'll be the last time we say it's Dukat, because he is a looming presence over the course of DS9's whole story and plays different roles as time goes on, and obviously, as you could imagine, becomes more and more important. But in season 1, it's quite interesting to me that he's mostly just like a specter on a view screen. He gets called up on occasion. Odo, rattles his cage now and again. Cisco is talking to him. He's leaving information to piss Kira off. He's there, and he kind of represents the Cardassian threat overall as a presence. And
he's always been the face of Cardassians. Like, I forget what his Gull character was in, not Chain of Command. It was The Wounded.
Correct.
But I mean, just like Armin Shimmerman basically established Ferengi as a species and evolved through that and ultimately came to represent the best that that species could be viewed on screen. What's his name? Mark
Almo.
This is the guy that best represents what Cardassians have to offer the viewer in terms of a species and characters.
That's a great way of putting it, Peter. Like, he really does capture the imperious nature of the Cardassians in his ability to portray Dukat. He sets a standard with it. He creates the mold that others end up following, kind of maybe in the same way that Sarek represents that for Vulcans, as we've talked about as we've started reviewing the TOS era movies. He really does it. And then Garrick is in the season. He's great. Rom's in it. He's a dramatically different character later on, so he almost doesn't count. Vedic Wynn's obviously important. Vedic Brile's important. Negus Zek is important. But I'm with you on your other mention here, which is like Nog is probably second. Like, Nog is actually a character very well paired with Jake that helps Jake as a character and makes the universe feel lived in as a civilian space station where there's like normal people present of other races.
Nog's also great because he's a black sheep within this Ferengi cell, and is not marching in lockstep with his capitalist family, and is showing these emotional weaknesses that they condemn him for, but it endears the audience towards him. So he is a very strong value add character. And the comedic timing on him choking up around girls and everything else is all fun stuff. But I love a bad guy, and Dukat is certainly that.
So, Peter, we have one-shot characters to consider next. We have a lot of options for season 1. So this is any character that appears solely within the season. Can be for multiple episodes, but typically only for one. And in this case, it's everything from the Duras sisters, Q, Vash, Kaiopaka, Maritza, Jean-Luc Picard, the old man farmer, the Bajoran super terrorist guy, the guy who banged Dax's mom, or the guy who is the son of the mom who Dax banged, and so on down the line. The Joe Dirt people. With all of this in mind, Peter, what did you pick?
Like the self-stealing bolts.
Yeah, that's a great one-shot character. Actually, it's more of a recurring character.
Oh, really?
To be honest with you, yeah, they show back up.
Sorry,
in
we're
multiple
disqualifying
seasons.
this then?
Yeah.
The Duras sisters, who I always love, and they just fit into this story and this alcove of dirty truck stop shit so perfectly. It's a shame that they had to fuck around and find out in Generations and pay the price ultimately.
Right. I wanted more of these guys in shady, Bajoran Casablanca. Instead, they had to go fuck with the flagship and get their asses kicked.
Because, again, they were strong enough to go up against the best of the Federation. And I love the idea of these powerhouses slumming it around Deep Space Nine and, like, the real handful and problem that they could have been had they survived and been able to become reoccurring things, especially as the Dominion War gets going and some other stuff. So,
absolutely. And it was great that they went to interact with Garrick, too. Was their shady contact, right? Like, because it establishes him as well.
Absolutely. How about you, Joe?
Maritza from Duet. I'm sorry. It's just like great actor that they picked for that. Old stage actor. Somebody who understood the assignment as the slang goes and really was able to deliver on a performance despite, like, you got to think about these actors that are in this makeup. They're saying things that are essentially gibberish. They're using made up like races and things, and yet you would never know that by how this guy delivers on this material and how he embodies this character who feels such intense shame over being adjacent to monstrosity and having, in his opinion, cowardly not done anything about it, that he's willing to die to do something about it now. It's a huge ask on the part of anybody to give that kind of role to them and tell them execute on this, especially when you got to act across from Nana Visitor, who's going 150%. He meets the challenge. It's a great character. It's a great one-shot Trek character.
She and her energy, especially in an adversarial role, just has to be a trampoline to help you hit your own heights. Like,
it's got to be intimidating.
Sitting in a cell, God, I don't know, man. Like, I think about my time, like, doing bullshit little acting and stuff. When you've got someone that can really bring it on the other side in high conflict scenes like that, like,
yeah.
Again, that's an alley-oop for him to just fucking belt out some of those monologues and, like, try and put her in her place. Like, what a dream opportunity to be against her in her prime on this stuff, especially playing the bad guy. So, he was 50% of what made that episode so great. So, strong. And then I see you've got the shout out to Q there, which I agree with. Throw Vosh there too, man. Like the whole next gen entourage crew coming in.
So we got the V'ger Please special coming up next. It's the award that you created way back when we originally reviewed Jetrel for Voyager, and that is Weak as Shit. Explain what this is to the people, sir.
Weak as Shit is something that is unforgivable, that should have never gotten out of the writer's room, that someone should have slapped that script out of people's hand and said, this is fucking terrible, and they are never going to forgive us for what you're doing. And the actors should have done the same thing and been like, what's happened? Where's the other pages? How do we explain this?
The weakest scene construction might be the best way to put it, but an event that occurs on screen that is so weak and so poorly justified that it really defies the continuity of the franchise itself. And this came to be because of the momentarily attempted reversal of a genocide as by the part of Voyager transporters that was almost worked, and then they just gave up on for no reason that they were able to explain.
Here's your 15 seconds of effort. We cannot afford 16. I'm sorry, we have to leave now. Goodbye. There's coffee and a nebula we need to go pursue.
Every season has its weakest shit, Peter. and I hand the floor to you. What's the weakest shit?
For me, it could be nothing other than the Planet of Living Forever from
Planet Mike Ementrout for that Kaiopaka got stranded on. Yes.
Battle Lines, right?
Yeah.
Which I had called a good episode, and I think I realistically need to knock that one down to meh. This Outer Limits episode, right, with this big twist and whatever, this would have been a perfect Q episode or something else where magic is at play, and instead it was technology, and because it was technology interacting with the Federation technocrats, it was just ridiculous. This is how you got rid of Kaiopaka, and in reality, she's alive and well on the surface of a planet where she cannot die. She can be contacted, so all of the Bajoran religious procession stuff is completely undermined by the fact that she should be there and accessible. And I don't know, maybe you're just keeping your mouth shut, and there's going to be an episode where they go, oh no, Kai Wynn is terrible. How do we combat her? And she's like, oh, here's some great tips, but assuming they never go back to this planet, that's dumb. Resource management on the planet is dumb. They could have just been like, hey, we all eat berries and life fucking sucks. We can't farm anything because of this war. Like, they didn't put the right amount of exposition into handle this wild gift that these prisoners have been given. And then you say, hey, the Federation's brushing up against it, and we could do infinite good with this place.
Like, imagine the report that Sisko would have to give after that, right? Like, Commander Sisko, are you telling me that you went to a planet in the Gamma Quadrant with the Pope of the Bajoran people? Yes. And on this planet, you found out that there is a population of prisoners, or so they say, that live forever because of the magic tech that is sustaining them. Yes. Yes, that is correct. And you made no effort whatsoever to say, bring that back with you so that we might find a way to, perhaps eliminate death or something else super miraculous. No, I did not.
You don't even have to bring it back with you. You can just bring people there and bring peace to these
That's how peace is brought. Like, a Federation just drops 10,000 colonists on the place and be like, hey guys, you're civilized now.
Yeah, you assholes we're going to bring our future technology of jail cells.
You're just going to get locked up. It's fine.
I don't know who Sisko reports to directly. I'm going to assume that the day they got this report on their desk, they had a real rager with a lot of Romulan ale the night before, and they're just hung the fuck over and completely do not comprehend anything on this page, and just turn off the pad, eat more aspirin, then go lay down. That is the only way that they butterfingers this.
It is the weakest shit.
Moment of the 24th century.
I agree, but there is a runner-up that kind of leads to, I think, what should be our DS9 award, which is the runner-up weakest shit is that somehow Rom evaded any kind of charges.
You're giving this your weakest shit award as well?
Yes. Oh, I'm giving Planet Mike Ementrout my award. Don't get me wrong.
Wow,
it is the weakest shit.
The gracious hall pass you gave it when we reviewed the episode itself.
You're right. I gave it a hall pass because I'm more generous than you, but you're still correct. But Rom evading any kind of charges for trying to kill his brother twice in the course of one episode.
Well, I mean, that was simple. That was just him, a little bit of food poison, and he shoved him down the stairs, right? That was no big deal.
No, I'm pretty sure there was a suicide drone at one point. There was actual explosives used. And it could have breached a hull or something important. But this leads to, I think, the category I would introduce, and we can end on this.
Well, hold on. Real quick. You know what happens through the rest of Deep Space Nine. Do we need to consider an award for the best terrorist bomb to detonate on Deep Space Nine?
Ooh, actually, yes, because there's two options for season 1.
Yeah.
And
There's two separate bombings, at least.
Best bombing though is actually in the hands of the prophets. Let's be clear.
Oh,
That school bombing that the Hadi Bajoran tech lady does, fantastic.
Weakest shit. Runner-up number 3 is the fact that school bomb did not breach the outer hull and just suck the entire promenade out into the cold mauve space.
Yeah, weakest shit number 4 is that O'Brien did not bang his Bajoran assistant. You created quite a bit of fan fiction around how that could have gone. But there should be a category. And the category is best Ferengi crime of the season. Because, let's face it, Quark doesn't get prosecuted, Rom doesn't get prosecuted, Nog doesn't get prosecuted, because Sisko...
Grand Nagus doesn't get prosecuted.
Grand Nagus doesn't get prosecuted. So...
his son doesn't get prosecuted.
We need to create a category of the best Ferengi crime of the season. And to me, it is Rom who takes it down, because nothing says I want the bar more than attempting to... He used a suicide drone. He's in the fucking Ukrainian army trying to kill Russians. He's just trying to lay him out with a bomb attached to a little robot.
Also, again, you're in outer space. The wall gets a hole ripped in it, and people are going to get sucked out into space.
That's a 10 to 15 year felony. Nothing. No charges. No charges.
Yeah, his Rom getting off the hook on 2 separate fratricide attempts that significantly damaged the station. When you've got this old screw Odo who is just merciless in his dogged pursuit of justice, completely hands off. I don't know, man. Quark and co just have this get out of jail free card that is OP as fuck.
Quark was the runner-up because, of course, he did facilitate hiring a mercenary gang that took over a ship that had Space Dr. Mengele and
people died.
Bashir's brain, and people definitely died as part of that. So, but he's more of an accessory to murder than actually attempting to kill somebody. So, Rom is taking the award here for season 1.
I want to mention hot security lady who fell off a Quark's bar.
Oh yeah,
as my disposable character, and she also plays into more Ferengi shenanigans with low railing heights that I think could have led to additional crimes and OSHA violations. Yes, Sisko does absolutely get an honorary Ferengi point for extorting Quark by threatening to put his child into prison.
It's probably one of the more interesting moments that he has in the whole of Emissary, right? It establishes his character as somebody who's willing to operate outside the rules in a way we've not seen before right off the rip, and proves that writing Sisko as a pragmatist and a real politic observer is definitely it differentiates him. It differentiates him from this point forward. So I liked that. I enjoyed rewatching season 1. I'm hyped to watch season 2. And, what do you think, Mandy? Are you really finally getting that first round of meat at Fogo de Chao? Is the Brazilian steakhouse bringing you the good shit now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And I see Seth up here saying that he's currently watching through season 2 of Enterprise, and just how bad things have been that we've gone through, and just this wonderful start to a deep and rich episode. Again, though, man, we are not watching this thing the way that it was released. Watching it on our own timelines without VCRs being involved. I can see how this TV show was very dangerous to the studio from a presentation standpoint, because it required such attentive consumption by the consumer. And even within the rabid Star Trek fan base, getting that compliance because of limitations of technology and show delivery was so limited. Real fucking gamble here. And this opens the door to golden age of television, Game of Thrones, Battlestar Galactica, all that. But Man, this is a big ask for people to be around at 7 o'clock on a Thursday or whatever the fuck this was.
And also have to follow it around on the schedule, week to week, month to month, season to season, because it's going to change, station to station. Just a different environment where how people had to interact with their media, and it's worth remembering that as we go through this. But is this Trek at the height of its powers?
If I was a 42-year-old watching this TV show, and we had one of our listeners, say as much, like, this is what drove them to go out. It was Star Trek that drove them to go out and buy a functional VCR, to record the stuff, to be able to watch it later on. Like, I get it now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I ended up doing at the same time, too. Although DS9 is something I definitely enjoyed after it was on, in its totality. I think I mentioned this earlier on when we were reviewing season 1. I really started watching DS9 essentially when Worf got on the show. That's when it recaptured my attention. I kind of watched a little bit of it, and like a lot of people, I fell off. But once they dug into the Worf stuff and they brought Worf onto the show, that's when I was actually watching it more extra at the time it was coming out, and then really started to appreciate it more when I was in college and rewatched the entire season.
Worf's what, season 3?
4, beginning of season 4.
Season pretty deep then.
Yeah, no, it's halfway through the show, but they introduce him at the right time and for the right reason. It feels very much like, yeah, this is a guy who gets reassigned to this because he fits in with what's going on here. And we'll talk more about that when the time comes, but let me talk a little about the future for us here. First and foremost, if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you. If you're following along live, we appreciate you. Again, as I mentioned, we would love, if possible, to generate as much for donations for June as we can. One of our listeners whose home and livelihood was essentially destroyed by Hurricane Helene. So if you can, I've linked it again to the live chat. Please throw anything you got in there. I promise to be less annoying about this in the future, but we would really appreciate anything that you can do. Next week, you'll actually hear from us from our Patreon backlog. So we've got reviews of Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock that'll be going up to the masses for the next couple weeks as Peter and I get our feet under us and do a few more Season 2 episodes in preparation for releasing that to all of you. And then we'll start in on Season 2 after you've heard from us on those movies. And for terms of our Patreon content for the future, in case you are a patron and you want to be part of that, let me go ahead and get the old link here. It's at patreon.com/VeedYourPlease, but, here we are live streaming. I should probably go ahead and give you the link. On there, we will be doing a review of Star Trek V, but also, Peter and I have discussed, based on Jack's recommendation from Discord, we're going to go back to Voyager and actually redo our episode on Lineage that we actually recorded but lost because of a technical issue way back in the day. It's the only episode of Voyager that we shot an episode of and weren't able to release it because we took a pass on the whole 7 of 9 sexual assault innuendo episode because it's like, it sucks. But that one we did. And so, you know what? We're going to go back for the completionists. We want to revisit it. And we're going to do it as a Patreon episode. And we're going to put that in the mix with all of the movie reviews. So we're going to finish all of the TOS era movies. We're going to do our missing episode of Voyager. And then after that, that's when we got to make a decision. Do we do Fallout? Do we do Kindred the Embraced?
Fallout.
I know. I want to do Fallout too. But Kindred the Embraced, because it would have let us finally tell our fans some LARP stories. The good ones.
We need to watch some more movies too, man.
It's true. There's some more stuff out there for us to look at. I'd love to actually consider also Shogun or some modern television that's very good that, might be worth kind of cracking open and looking at it from a critical perspective the way you and I can. So let us know what you think. Join the Patreon and give us your opinions. And We appreciate the support you can give us as well. But I'll be honest with you, if you've got some extra change in your pocket, I'd prefer you give it to June right now. So please take a look at her GoFundMe and be generous if it is within your capacity to do so. So thank you so much for everybody for listening to our season 1 rip of